Sociologists Michael Omi and Howard Winant, in their seminal work Racial Formation, say that what was most significant about the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s was that folks of color, women, gays and lesbians, and folks with disabilities began to socially and politically define themselves. They no longer accepted the definition of who they were and what they were that had been given to them by their oppressors. Oppressed folks began to voice their own definitions, their own names, tell their own stories. Just as the words of Maxine Hong Kingston, noted Chinese-American author who I paraphrase, gave voice to the challenges of stereotypes and mishistory as she challenges us to distinguish what is Chinese or Japanese or Hapa and what is the movies. Just as the words of Janice Mirkatani in writing a poem for her mother, who testified during the redress and reparation hearings, gave voice, encouraging and respecting the many Issei who spilled words to kill the silence that was the tragedy of the World War II concentration camps. Just as the words of toddlers' books, written by me and other folks of color, because there are so few of them for our daughters and sons, give voice to our family and foods. But with voice comes responsibility. And it is to that responsibility that I turn some of my thoughts today. To begin, I want to place our panel here today, this discussion within the larger context of Asian Pacific America. In many respects, Asian Pacific American community is at a crossroads. We're challenged continuously from the changing demographics to the poison of the model minority image. So, what is Asian Pacific American? What is Asian Pacific America? In summary, I believe Asian Pacific American can be characterized in two ways. First, Asian Pacific American is a U.S. government-imposed population category based on persons' ancestral heritage with racial implications. Second, Asian Pacific American is a personal and political identity for persons of Asian or Pacific ancestral heritage who call the U.S. home and have embraced this categorization as an instrument of strength and of community building. In the first notion of Asian Pacific American, we have experienced rapid and massive growth since the passage of the 1965 Immigration Act, which lifted the racial and national restrictions on immigration from Asia, putting Asian countries on par with all other nations of the world. For the first time since 1882 in the Chinese Exclusion Act, we were equals. In the pre-1965 U.S., mainland Pacific America was dominated in numbers by Japanese Americans and comprised of Chinese, Filipino, Korean, and Asian Indian immigrants. Asian Pacific American community members generally tended to be male, despite the family formation via picture brides in the Japanese and Korean immigrant communities, and smaller groups of interracial marriage among South Asians with Mexicans in California, Chinese with Irish in New York, and Chinese with blacks in Louisiana and Mississippi, along with Filipinos with whites in California. The vast majority of these immigrant pioneers worked in wage labor positions. Asian Pacific Americans tended to live on the West Coast with fledgling communities and neighborhoods elsewhere in the U.S. In the post-1965 and Vietnam War area, the 20-year period from 1980 to 2000 has seen the Asian Pacific American population grow from just under 4 million persons to nearly 13 million today, representing roughly 4% of the U.S. total population. In 2000, 42 of the 50 states boasted Asian Pacific American populations in excess of 25,000 or more, while 19 states boasted populations of 100,000 or more. Families have replaced unaccompanied males, and the population is characterized by bimodal occupation and class distribution, with a highly successful group at the top of one node and the lower class group working in the secondary labor market occupying the other. In the 35 years following the 1965 Chinese and Filipino Americans replaced Japanese as the first and second largest ethnic Asian Pacific American populations, respectively. In addition to the 1965 Immigration Act, the end of the Vietnam War in 1975 brought new diversity to the APA community in the form of Southeast Asian refugees from Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, followed by chain migration of their family members. The high-tech boom of the 1990s greatly increased the numbers and diversity of South Asian population. Today, 30-plus Asian language dialects are spoken in the home and among friends, designating more than 30-plus Asian Pacific American ethnic communities. But the diversity of Asian Pacific America has not been relegated to just the introduction of, quote, new immigrant ethnic groups. Diversity has been born into Asian America, born into our ethnic communities. Interracial and interethnic marriage, whether by American-born second and third generation or fourth, or by international and military spouses, has produced multiracial and multi-ethnic children. As I turn now to the Japanese American community, Japanese Americans, once the largest ethnic group, it now represents one of the smallest of the 7 major U.S. census-recognized APA ethnic groups, with a 2000 census national population of about 800,000. However, this number grows to over 1 million when multiracial Japanese Americans are included. No longer are we only the sons and daughters and grandchildren of those who were incarcerated in World War II. The community is now much more complex than that. During the mid-1990s, the Japanese American community leaders began to acknowledge this complexity and the diversity, and in 2000 held the first Nikkei conference here in Los Angeles, this little Tokyo, to begin a national community dialogue about being Japanese American and what constitutes the Japanese American community, because since the 1950s, Japanese America has become increasingly heterogeneous, outwardly diverse in race, class, and sexual orientation. Indeed, it is to this portion of diversity in the Japanese American community and subsequently in the Asian Pacific American community that we would like to join with you today in this discussion. Today, we wish to give voice and a face to multiracial Asian Americans. And while we cannot and do not speak for all Hapas, we believe the words we will share today will ring with familiarity to those of you who share our background. In planning for today, the panelists, Dr. Rika Houston, Dr. Teresa Williams-Leon, and Dr. Tracy Tiemeyer and I met about a month ago to talk about what we wanted to do. The discussion that we had quickly turned to stories about our families and our families' lives, our professional lives, our personal lives, and our community lives. The more we talked, the more we thought, wouldn't it be great if folks could just hear this conversation? And so we're calling you now to join us in that conversation.